Welcome to School Story, where every school has a story waiting to be told. Join us, two seasoned school administrators, as we delve into the heart of educational experiences. Each episode is a journey through the dynamic world of schooling, where we uncover the triumphs, challenges, and untold narratives that shape the lives of students, teachers, and communities. All right, welcome back to School Story. My name is Stewart Hudnall, and today we're doing something a little different. We're going to be doing a book summary, a book review of a non-educational book. It's actually called Radical Candor by Kim Scott, and it's one of my all-time favorite business books, communication books, leadership books, and honestly, couldn't come at a better time. I find myself having some difficult conversations today, letting some teachers know of what their future was going to look like, and it's not easy. This book's beautiful because it made waves in the business world, and let's talk about how we can apply it into education, not only as a leader in the school, but also as a leader within your classroom. What does that look like? So let's dive into it. She defines it as the ability to challenge directly and show you care personally at the same time. It's about being honest and compassionate in your feedback. That's not easy to do. It is a difficult thing to challenge directly and also show that you care personally at the same time. Always my goal, especially on those difficult conversations, but I know I fall short. So what I wanted to do is, because it's so full of so many good things, but also not a super long read. There's only 7 chapters. I wanted to give you some chapter summaries, talk about the things that stuck out to me, what my favorite stuff was, and give you a favorite quote and a key takeaway from each chapter. And at the end, I'll give you my 5, 3, 1, with my 5 takeaways, 3 quotes, and 1 thing you can apply in your classroom today. So the first chapter, biggest thing. If you've ever heard me talk about being an educator, this is the thing I come back to time and time and time again. When I'm hiring teachers, when I'm hiring custodians, when I'm hiring anybody in the building, this is the very, very first thing that I focus on. I talk about building relationships. And it's no surprise that she starts the very first chapter with building relationships in the very first part of her book. It's all foundational from there. She indicates that it is the foundation of not only her book, but Radical Candor, how you can build genuine, caring relationships. She talks about experiences she had and how you can go about knowing your colleagues and students beyond just their roles, which is an interesting concept. Part of the reasons I always really enjoyed being part of FBLA and DECA and overnight trips with different groups was I got to know the kids beyond the classroom. I got to see them more of as a human, which sounds wrong, but you know what I mean? Kind of like when they freak out when they see educators in the supermarket or anywhere else. It's like, holy cow, you're a real person. I know, it makes me laugh too. So she goes on and she suggests regular check-ins, personal conversations to try to understand the individual motivation and challenges. What are they struggling with? What are some of their challenges? In a classroom, she talks about it as a team setting when you're leading a team, but within a classroom, what it can look like is creating a classroom environment where students feel seen and heard. It's about making that connection before you're offering the praise or criticism, because it's going to mean more when they know that it comes from a place and a person that they truly value and trust. So my favorite quote from that chapter is, personal connection builds trust, and trust is the foundation of good guidance. So my key takeaway from chapter 1 of building relationships: establishing genuine connections with students and colleagues is fundamental. In an educational setting, knowing your students and staff as individuals is crucial for effective communication and leadership. It's always helpful when you're able to talk to a student and say, hey, Kobe, saw you on the basketball court last night, man. Like, you crushed it. You did great. Now, how's that paper coming, right? I mean, your approach is going to be however it is, but when you're able to show that personal touch beforehand, it's going to make a big difference. So chapter 2 is getting and giving praise. She talks about the power of praise, and we all know that power. We've all experienced it, especially prevalent and especially critical for students K through 12. As they start spreading their wings and figuring out who they are, they're looking to outside people to validate and to praise them. And that's what your role can be in that situation with the student. So what she talks about is it's not just praise like, "Hey, you're a good dude. Way to go, Colby." But rather it's about specific and sincere. Like, "Hey, your left-hand shot on that layup, man, that was beautiful." Whether or not it's basketball related, but there's something that you can take that's going to be specific and sincere. And that's the key as educators. When we're praising those students, we need to make sure that it is specific to make it meaningful. When we can give them that exact reinforcing positive encouragement, it's going to be so much more powerful for them. So my favorite quote, this I almost feel like I want to put it up on my wall. I got a lot of stuff on my wall. It says, "Praise specifically, criticize generally." And I was like, wow, well, don't you love when you read something in a book and you kind of just stop and you highlight it and then you write under it or you write out to the side and you keep coming back to it and you keep kind of thinking. It kind of gets stuck in the old noggin. I love when a book does that, and this did it chapter after chapter after chapter for me. So specific or key takeaway is specific praise is much more impactful. In education, tailoring praise to acknowledge specific achievements of students and staff, it's going to reinforce that positive behavior, and it always boosts morale. Uh, I don't care if you're a 6-year-old or a 60-year-old. It's always nice to get praise from someone above you, whether it's in a literal leadership position or somebody that you trust and value their opinion. So chapter 3, this was the hard one where she starts getting into the nitty gritty of the radical candor and what it looks like. Talks about telling hard truths. Here, Scott tackles the challenge of providing honest, constructive criticism. It's about caring personally and challenging directly. That was one of my all-time favorite parts of it, is because caring personally, challenging directly. In a school setting, that might involve addressing a student's disruptive behavior or a colleague's teaching method. Uh, Going through the evaluation phases right now, and had to have some honest conversations with some teachers about what I was seeing in the classroom. Um, and I really tried to show that it wasn't a personal attack, but it came from a place where I do care about them. I care about their students, and I want not only them to be successful in their classroom, but also the students to be there. And so it can be an interesting part, especially those hard truths. I remember even at times giving feedback to people above me, letting them know maybe a tick or a habit or something that they do that might help them, if they were to get rid of that. And she actually shares a story in her book, Kim Scott, about that. And I think about it all the time in those situations. So the idea she talks about in chapter 3 is to offer feedback that's not just critical. That's not feedback. That's just being a jerk. But it's also helpful, aiming for improvement rather than demoralization, right? We don't want to demoralize them. We want to improve. So how can we give that feedback? Because it can come across either way. You can have them feel walking away like, yeah, I can do better, or man, I suck. How are they going to leave your office, or how are they going to leave that conversation in the hall or your classroom? So a favorite quote from chapter 3, when you don't care personally, criticism can be cruel, but when you do care, it's invaluable. So the key takeaway is honest, compassionate feedback. It's vital. For educators, this means addressing issues directly, but with empathy, making sure we're aiming to foster growth and understanding. How can we encourage that growth mindset without paralyzing them? So chapter 4, encouraging feedback. This one is a good one because it's all about creating an environment where feedback is welcome and valued. And the best way to do that, yeah, do it yourself. Ask for it. You've got to start. You've got to set the stage. In the book, she gives strategies for soliciting feedback and how we should respond to it effectively. Because it's one thing when someone says, "Oh yeah, I want your feedback. I want your feedback," but then in the moment when you give it to them and they're not very happy about it, yeah, then you're not going to give it again. And you're not going to feel like you work in a place where feedback is encouraged and valued. So in a school, what does it look like? It could mean that your students are encouraged to share their thoughts in the classroom environment or on your teaching methods. I always loved giving anonymous at the end of each quarter and semester. I'd give the kids a 3x5 card, and it would be 100% anonymous. And I would tell them, give me feedback. Now, because they're teenagers and they're young, I'm helping them understand what constructive criticism is. I would tell them, don't write on there and say, "Hey, your beard sucks," right? Like, I mean, I like my beard. Talk about my beard a lot, but What it also means is, what can I do to improve as a teacher? What feedback can you say? Hey, when you do this, it drives me crazy. For me, spoiler, I say the word color weird. I've tried. I just say color weird. Nothing I can do about it. I mean, I'm sure I could, but man, I can't get it. And so some of the feedback would be how pronunciation would drive them crazy. It's great. I really tried. I just can't get it. So how can you create that culture where feedback is seen as a tool for growth, not criticism? We talk about growth mindset a lot, but as educators, are we allowing others to give us the feedback so that we continue to grow and maintain that growth mindset? Because it's easy to have the poster on the wall, but when that kid comes at you, or the colleague or the administrator, like, how do we take that? They might approach it wrong, but how can we ensure that we take it? Favorite quote: soliciting guidance isn't just about getting to know people, it's about getting to know what people know. Love that. Recently finished a bunch of interviews with the different programs we have at our school, and it was fascinating to learn the differences, because, man, there's so many things and so many nuances that I wouldn't have known if I hadn't been able to have those conversations with them. So, key takeaway: cultivating an environment where feedback is encouraged and valued is the key. Educators, we got to foster that classroom culture where students feel safe to express that thoughts and idea. So, chapter 5, guidance in action. She starts providing some real examples, and it gets real. For educators, it means real life scenarios of how to balance praise and criticism in the classroom, and also what does it look like in the staff room. Those are sometimes the hardest ones. It's about applying the principles of radical candor that she's going through in your day-to-day interactions, and see how it transforms your relationships and your outcomes. Favorite quote: the essence of leadership is not getting overwhelmed by circumstances. Love it, because, man, that's easy. The key takeaway: practical application of radical candor. It involves adapting to various situations while maintaining balance and feedback. In education, it means we've got to be flexible and responsive to all those different situations that are happening, whether it's in the assistant principal's office, whether it's in your classroom, whether it's in the lunchroom, recess duty. There's so many times where we have that responsibility to be flexible and make sure that we're striving to understand what's going on. So, chapter 6, getting it right. Uh, she's diving into the right balance in feedback. She emphasizes the need to adjust your approach based on the individual's need. So, in an educational context, this means understanding that each student and different teacher is different. We're going to have to approach our feedback differently. That I've got people that I know that I tell them how it is. I don't like to beat around the bush, and I just give it to them. There's other students and teachers that I know I can't do that. That's not their approach, and that's okay. I have to approach it in a different manner, in order to make it be something that is going to be valuable, that they're actually going to accept and feel like is important, and something that they want to move forward with. And that if my feedback is so, I don't know, bad's the approach. If the approach is wrong, then it's not going to allow them to even accept it or even think about what that's going to look like. And so I've got to figure out, how can I approach it to make sure that that doesn't happen, because that's not what I want. If I'm having those conversations, there's a reason. I've got to figure out how to do it. So, chapter 6, chapter 6, she dives into finding the right balance in feedback. She emphasizes the need to adjust your approach based on the individual's need. Um, what we've got to do is tailor our communication style to the individual's need. Favorite quote of that chapter is, the right approach is the one that helps the other person, which some of these is just like, yeah, but it's always a really good reminder that we need to sometimes have a different type of conversation about that. Um, she has a 2x2 and arrows. If you're in podcast land, I apologize, but there's an X axis and a Y axis. It's been a while. And what she has is, she has the 4 quadrants. And those 4 quadrants are the ones that she talks about, and how we can get to make sure that we have that radical candor where we're caring personally and also challenging directly. What she does, and if you Google it, you'll see it. Radical candor, that allows for the growth. The obnoxious aggression, she's got some really great pictures that go with it. And it really does help you understand what she's talking about when she means these different quadrants. Because sometimes the quadrants, you're like, well, what exactly does that mean? What exactly does that look like? I don't know. Some of them are easy. Obnoxious aggression, we know what that is. We know what that person looks like. In fact, I bet you all could just stop, collaborate, and listen. Anyone? Okay. And think about who that person is. Manipulative insincerity, right? You're seeming sincere, but really you're about to stab them in the back. You're about to let them have it. And then ruinous empathy. Man, that one's a hard one for me. Basically, that's like the old adage is you're going to tell that person their flies down. Or you're going to tell that friend that they have a piece of toilet paper stuck to their shoe, or they've got a piece of spinach in their teeth, because you're so scared about hurting their feelings that you don't want to tell them. And in the end, it actually causes problem, because there's been time, story time, maybe TMI, but one time I got home from work, and as I'm taking my pants off, I realized there was a huge hole in the crotch. I don't know how, when, where, what, anything. I just know I had a hole in the crotch. And the next day at work, in fact, I took a picture and sent it to my coworkers. I was like, are you kidding me? You let me walk around like this and never said anything? Not cool. Not cool. That's what it's talking about. Be that person that lets that friend know. And since reading this book, I have really challenged myself. There's been times where it's been uncomfortable, but like, hey, you got something right there. Going back to the manipulative insincerity, that's the silent contempt. It's your false humility, your protective hesitation, your political behavior, passive aggressive behavior, backstabbing, self-protective silence. They're not going to say anything because it serves them, not because they're doing it out of any other valid reason. Obnoxious aggression, it's that arrogance, it's that character attack, the self-righteous shaming, the bullying behavior, the front stabbing. They're just going to give it to you how it is, which honestly, I would prefer someone to stab me in the front instead of the back. Are you the same? Let me know. Would you rather have someone stab you in the back than the front? I don't know. So last, building that radically candid culture. That's the top right quadrant that you want. Asking for that the criticism, offering specifics, practicing being kind and clear with your criticism. The Brene Brown quote is always my favorite: clear is kind. Sometimes I just got just tell me how it is. Like, don't beat around the bush. When we have that approach of that candidly radical candor, it's really going to have those honest, open conversations with compassionate, and that communication is really the norm. So chapter 7, creating a culture of guidance, starts with you. And so without further ado, let's get to one of my all-time favorite parts of any book that I read. Got a little ukulele music, because man, it's nice. Let's set that. I love it. Love me the ukulele, right? Oh man, I love it. So number 5 takeaways. Number 1, build genuine relationships. Relationships are the foundation of effective communication and leadership. It all comes down to the 3 R's: relationships, relationships, relationships. Number 2, praise specifically and sincerely. Specific praise is more impactful and meaningful, especially for students, and especially those students that don't hear praise very often. Number 3, offer constructive feedback. The goal with the feedback should be to help them grow, not just to point out flaws. That's easy. That's easy to do. But how can we help them grow? Number 4, foster a feedback culture. I love it. Think about how you can create a school culture where feedback is welcomed, it's sought out, and it's looked for, and it's valued. Number 5, so last one, adapt to individual needs. Understand that each student and teacher is different. They need a different approach. All right, my 3 quotes. You ready for it? I'm ready for it. Radical candor is the sweet spot between managers who are obnoxiously aggressive on one side and ruinously empathetic on the other. Right? It's that sweet spot. You don't have the aggressive one, and you don't have that ruinous empathy on the other side, right in the middle. So quote number 2, when you don't care about each other, you can't practice radical candor. It's just obnoxious aggression. It's really hard to show that compassion when you don't care about the person. Number 3, the best guidance is praise and criticism that is kind and clear, specific and sincere. That's a mouthful. Let's try that again. The best guidance is praise and criticism that is kind and clear, specific and sincere. There's times when criticism needs to happen, when that feedback needs to happen, but when it's kind and clear and specific and sincere, it's going to be better for everybody. So the very last thing, your one thing you can implement today, if you're an educator, start with feedback session in your classroom. If you're not a teacher, what does it look like? How can you do it with your team? Maybe if you're an administrator, it's just your direct administrative team, or maybe it's with the school. Maybe it's with your community council. What can you do to ask? How can you solicit that feedback? Begin by asking students one thing you did well and one thing you could improve on. Not only are you modeling that radical candor, but it also helps build that feedback-rich environment. So there you have it. Kim Scott, she's awesome. Reached back out on Twitter years ago when I first read that book, and she responded. She seems like a really cool cat. We'll have to get her on the podcast someday. That would be amazing. So that's all for today's episode of School Story. Remember, implementing radical candor in our school and classroom, it just is going to lead to more honest, respectful, and thriving educational environment. So until next time, keep learning and growing.